one final point to your question is we've got far more success cases now than we had 2, 3, 4 years ago because of how many different types of assets we monitor, how many different types of industry we're now working in, which is still, it's been many for a long time, but now we start to really get deeply involved in different types of assets.
Welcome to the Trend Detection Podcast, powered by Siemens. And now your host, Niall Sullivan.
Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of the Trend Detection Podcast. I'm really pleased to welcome back Tom to the podcast, who's been on, I don't know how many it's been now, Tom, but it's a pleasure to have you back. Welcome back. How are you doing?
Thank you, Niall. Yeah, pleasure to be here. I think this is probably our 6th or 7th, something along that line.
Yeah, and this one's going to be the most memorable. I can feel it. Right,
100%.
Exactly. I mean, today's a really cool topic, actually, and it's really at the heart of the podcast, actually, because my when we launched this podcast however many years ago, it's all about sort of capturing the insights of all fantastic colleagues within Senseye, now Siemens. You guys have all the knowledge. You speak to customers every day. All these different conversations, and it's basically, I want to share some of that insight, or a lot of that insight, with the world. And we do that anyway across all of our episodes, hopefully. But for this episode, we're sort of digging into that a lot more. We're actually thinking exactly what is affecting the customer in the field, what are their thought process, what are their challenges, and it should always be around the customer as well, of course. So I guess to open the conversation, let's start with those common challenges customers face. What are customers saying to you at the moment, Tom? What are their big challenges they're facing?
Well, this is an interesting question because, in terms of what my job is, it's really to break down for customers what it means, how it can impact your maintenance, how it can impact your production. And then to talk about this now on a podcast is brilliant because it helps me get the stage to talk about how many buzzwords there are, how many different confusing elements there are to this. But actually, at the crux of it, is the machine doing what the machine should be doing? Is the process outputting what it should be? Are you getting lots of downtime or lots of over-maintenance issues? I think quite often the challenge becomes you get too wrapped up in the complexities of it and you lose sight of what you're actually trying to achieve. So the first thing I would typically say is that you just look at the data you've got, you look at what gaps you've got, and then really try and understand what exactly are you trying to achieve. And that's the first step in any part of these processes.
But I guess in terms of the challenges, though, what are sort of customers really saying to you? When you first have these initial sort of conversations, what are the things that really sort of
I think the first challenge to that point, the first challenge is often that can't possibly be real. You've got a piece of software that can learn my asset in 2 to 5 days, normal operation. It can basically understand what the asset should do effectively on its own with a few prompts and the ability to have parameters set at the right sensitivities and so forth. And then from there, it has user input. Every time something gets changed or something gets fixed, it will incorporate that piece of information. It all sounds too good to be true. I think that challenge, the ability to understand that and see it for yourself is the biggest hurdle that we face. I think selling a product that sounds, like I mentioned, it too good to be true is probably the biggest difficulty, I think, to what we do.
And it's interesting. I mean, we always talk about on here about the dialogue with the customer. And it's you look at sort of vendor customer relationships. So it really is a partnership. I know it can be a bit of a cliche sometimes as well, but I mean, I guess have you seen examples of where the feedback from customers has been sort of directly influenced Senseye? I think we could probably talk about specifically today, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think when you've got different graphics, different methods of showing that data, different interfaces that the customer wants to see, you could have the smartest algorithms in the world, but if you can't then interpret that information in an interesting way or a simple way, having a traffic light system to start with is something that customers love having. So you can see, is it in a status of red or orange or yellow? That's very simple. It's something that we use pretty much unanimously across industry for different software. So something that aligns with that is standard. But then having reports is a pretty new feature of Senseye. So all of this stuff can be shown to you in a report. You can see different areas of the plant, different types of machine, different fleets of assets, all sort of bundled together in whatever kind of report you want, plus cases, open cases, closed cases. You can chat to Copilot. All these things have been driven by what customers want to see. So this is the direct feedback that you mentioned. And I think that's crucial because it shows customers that we'll work together on this. Typically the way many of our customers would shout in a certain direction, that's the direction that we would then engineer the product. So that's how Senseye has evolved into something that's very user-friendly, very well-suited to industrial environments. And that could be in pharmaceuticals, it could be in steel. These environments are different, but obviously maintenance at the core is effectively the same process. Is this part degrading? Does it need to be changed? Has it been changed? And then making sure as well that integrates with existing workflows. So that's another key part of what Senseye is very good at.
And I guess, again, bringing it back to your specific role, Tom, I guess, how do you sort of interface with the product team and making sure some of these some of these feedback's fed between both sort of departments?
So one of the latest features we've had is the ability, I say latest, it's been around for months already, is to have spectra being visible in Senseye. You can make very good use of data that's come into you at 10,000 hertz frequency or 46,000 hertz frequency, whatever it might be, depending on sensors. We can ingest that. We can do very clever things with it. You can see the FFT of that, so the fast Fourier transform. This is something that customers wanted. Oftentimes, you have vibration analysis that's done as a manual measurement. Maybe it's a monthly check. Someone will come in and do that inspection. They'll come in and kind of do all these measurements and leave and come back to you with a report of which bearings are failing, which shafts are starting to oscillate more than they should, and effectively give you a strategy, a plan that you should now follow. Now, one of the things customers wanted was to have that in the same piece of software that's telling them of tank level, of motor vibration, generically from a MEM sense or something like that. And now the ability to pull that back in. And my role then is to feed that right the way through, but customers want to see more of that. They want us to develop that tool. And this is really where we're going, because if you can start to take in manual measurements, things like oil samples and all the rest of it, which are from complex sensors online that would typically have been offline, you can start to completely remove manual checks that are to do, oil contamination or to do, things like spectra analysis, and feed all of that stuff in, which is complex information into a piece of software effectively. And to do that is really difficult. And to build a product around all of that stuff is also quite difficult because it's lots and lots of different variables all culminating together, as we've said in the past, plus PDF documents and so forth. So I think quite often I end up being the voice of the customer because it's my role to explain the latest conversations we've had, questions about can the software do X, Y, and Z, and just making sure that comes back to the team developing the product. And that's part of the way we've developed such a good product, because it shows us what the industry wants to have, what it wishes it could do already, and that's the direction we've gone in. So, in a very long answer to your question, it's important that we capture those feedbacks. So we don't just spend 6 months developing something and then deploy it. I don't know how many years ago that would have been, but maybe 5-10 years ago, that was the method. And there's very few gaps within that for a feedback cycle. So the goal now is to constantly keep understanding, are we going in the right direction? Are we iterating this in the direction that customers want us to? Is it a big customer or a small customer, or generically across the board, many customers want this same feature or functionality? And you have to listen to customers. I think that's really, really important. And we do that really well.
And I completely agree. I mean, listen to customers is key. I guess one other way to look at it as well, though, is when you've got lots of customers asking for lots of different functionality. I know it's more of a product team, prioritization in terms of the roadmap and etc. But I guess again, specifically to your role, Tom, how you sort of manage expectations and find. I mean, it's in your title, right? Solutions engineering. How you find solutions to things that might not be possible now in the app, but it could be in the future. Or it might not be possible in the future because other priorities, etc.
Yeah, and I think we've definitely touched on that in the past, and I think that's really the crucial part of it. No, I think that's a great question. So what we typically would say is common is things like MTBF, so mean time between failures. But I think more and more as we go on now, we start to see customers looking at things like unplanned versus planned maintenance ratios. How much time do they spend maybe fixing things that shouldn't be breaking down, so very reactive, or kind of doing too much. And then another emerging one is how effective are technicians and maintenance engineers when things break down. So I think some of the unexpected metrics that are starting to emerge are things like, okay, it's taken us this long to determine there's a problem because Senseye's helped us really speed that process up to troubleshooting a problem. And then actually, how fast can we understand what's going wrong? So you don't just have an increased, an improved process to understand what's going wrong and when and capturing it before you otherwise would have. But because of all the knowledge capture, you're now able to determine much faster or much more quickly what's actually going wrong and what you need to do to fix it. So if you needed to get a spare part ordered and into stock, that's what you can now do. And again, this goes down the road of, that sounds almost too good to be true. I think we've talked about that a lot in the past.
No, exactly. Yeah, a victim of its own success in a way, right?
Yeah,
and I mean now we've got we've got so many great public case studies. I mean, BlueScope Steel. I always mention BlueScope Steel. Satzenmilch in Germany as well. Check those out on the website. They really are sort of fascinating stories. Great examples of what's actually possible. But I mean, you mentioned there a lot of different things, a lot of different areas that predictive maintenance can influence. But is there often sort of misconceptions about what can be achieved with predictive maintenance, but it could be in terms of what can be achieved or the timescales in which it can be achieved? Is there still varying expectations on that level? Would you say?
I would love to say that we're very much at the point of plug and play, and you could just set some sensors up or plug some data in, and it all just works effectively on its own. Now, because of the nuance, the different asset types, the different industries, I mean, how many different types of customers we're working with, and there's differences across the board. There's different types of machine, there's different data frequencies, and all the rest of it. So we have to first of all put a project together that can factor that stuff in. And I think customers, more often than not, are happy to work with us on that scope phase, because at the end of it, you end up with a project very quickly, within just a few weeks, if we can get on site and have a look at the machines, or someone else can take photographs and really explain to us what's going wrong, how the machines work. As soon as we understand what the machines do, what sensors are in position, what data is available, we can build a project that's about as close to plug and play as you can get. And then from there, we can deploy the project, set it running, and do that operate and refine part of our process to really work together. I think some of the misconceptions might also be that PDM eliminates all failure. Now, I would always say, until we remove friction, which is, as far as I'm concerned, impossible, we're always going to get mechanical degradation. So bearings are pretty much the closest thing we get to frictionless. But still within that, they break down, they degrade, they get hot. You have to keep them lubricated. And there's also debris and all the rest of it that gets in there. They can be overloaded, they can be warped, whatever it might be. These things will degrade. If you look after them, they last a lot longer. But they're still going to have a lifetime. They are still going to need replacing at some stage. Now, if the bearing is still fine, every 6 months you don't need to change it. And in some cases, if you need to open something, get inside, allow debris and other contaminants to get in, you're actually making the problem worse. So having a system that's got sensors and it tells you, at exactly the right time, the bearing now is coming towards end of life, maybe based on all telemetries and what we know about this bearing, maybe you've got another month left. You can start to plan all of your operations around that. And I think maybe a misconception is that that's never going to be needed. What we're doing is we're optimizing the moment when it's needed. So it comes down to really forecasting and predicting. That's the name of the product, right? So it's predicting effectively when something's going to be needed. And that's based on anomalies and trends and other metrics from the system. I always tell customers it's not about predicting everything. It's about reducing that surprise element.
Exactly, and I guess the other layer I'd maybe add into it as well, because especially when you talk about AI and Gen AI as well, and decision support tool is another phrase that often comes up, and it's a good way to sort of describe things. It's not, the AI is not replacing anyone. It's not being, replace this exact moment and takes the human decision out of it. It's very important to emphasize the human element of this. It's advising humans to decide themselves what action they need to take. Right. That's what we're saying here as well.
That's another good misconception. No, I completely agree. And how often do we see it where if it's got AI, effectively it can take over and do all these things? Maybe one day, maybe, but I'm happy at the minute to say we're not at that stage just yet. And where we currently are is having a very, very clever piece of software, which I think is ahead of the curve. It's definitely far, far removed from a condition monitoring piece of software that tells you, you've reached 80%, therefore equals alert. It's a very incredibly clever system. I love working for Senseye for that reason, because this product is so versatile, and it's got the ability to continuously learn stuff. So maybe some of the misconceptions are that it's fixed and that product is then just set up for that machine, but it's not the case. It learns and develops, and if the asset changes, or if you change the bearings, for example, from a rubbish quality bearing to better quality, you're going to expect different patterns of vibration, different harmonic signatures, also a very different lifespan. That bearing should last you quite a lot longer. And that's where as well you want to make sure customers understand, that's the same bearing housing, it's the same shaft, it's the same machine, but we're going to expect different results from that. So we can tell the system to expect a different outcome, to perhaps relearn something, or to factor in spin speed of the shaft in addition to temperatures and so forth. So it's a very, very clever system. So making sure that customers fully understand how intelligent it is, and how we also don't have to have a knowledge of that machine prior to monitoring it. Often we get asked, I've got a big bucket of data, do you want to see that first? It's helpful. Maybe in some cases we see particular high spikes or deviations away from baseline that could be indicative of a failure. That's useful. But equally, we don't necessarily need that. We can monitor a gearbox for about a week, let's say, with a few variables if it has them. Different products might be produced on that production line. We can factor that in as context. But then from there, we see a baseline. We see a fingerprint is what we call it. And that's something that I think is sometimes a misconception. How can you possibly have a model for all of my 100 different asset types? If you need to, you can speak to, like you mentioned, Saxon Milk, Blue Scope Steel, customers like this who have many, many, many different asset types. And the same is true in pharmaceutical and automotive and food and beverage. And it's nice now. I think we have a lot of customers with the use cases, with the case studies that we've got. I'll leave it to you to point people in those directions.
No, exactly. And what's interesting about these different industries is there, and I guess again specific to your role and the conversations you have, Tom. How do you draw together the different experiences, the different conversations you have with customers from pharma, from food and beverage, and and bring it into your day-to-day role? So you might think a food and beverage customer doesn't have anything to do with an automotive customer, but is there things that you could bring into conversations with different customers in different industries?
The similarity is remarkable, I would say. And sometimes you think, well, here's a robot arm doing something, just to take one asset as an example. And you might think that if it's doing something in an automotive factory, it's very unique and specific to that, but actually the patterns of behavior are quite similar. The maintenance that goes alongside that is often basically the same. You still need to change things as they degrade. You still need to keep things clean, make sure you don't overload a piece of equipment. If you do, the steps that you take to mitigate that, to swap it out of production at the right times. Often the lines are so busy that you can't just do that change on the line. So you have replacement assets that could be swapped in and out if necessary. And it's nice to see customers when they speak to each other at different events that we've had, some of the podcasts and different webinars that you've done, I think are very good for bringing different customers together who do actually share the same experience. I used to be working on production lines, fixing them, making sure that they don't break down. I've worked in the hydraulic space and seen how hydraulic lubrication systems can break down and degrade, and just small elements of contamination, or even with hydraulic fluid, it's things like getting water in the oil. It's amazing how that's the same. The outcome of that in any industry leads to the same degradation, the same sort of negative outcomes. I think one of the things we can talk about is how does that then impact if it's a short-term thing or a long-term thing. So how do you react if it's something that's going to cause you a problem in the next week or the next couple of months, and what would you typically monitor? And equally, if it's something that that's our largest, most expensive machine, it basically never breaks down, right? And that's where we can start to look at, okay, what are the variables? If it were to break down, what impact is that going to have on manufacturing these cars or these tablets or this this paint or whatever it might be? And if you can start to see that, you start to see, well, right, if you've got a machine, it could have that one breakdown every year, but when it breaks down, that costs you 6 weeks of operational production. That's complete line stoppage. It could be plant shutdown, send everybody home. Maybe you've got redundancy, maybe you haven't. And these are all things that I have to factor in when we do scope workshops to make sure that we select the right assets. And also, if the data quality is there, do we need additional IoT sensors like vibration or current or something else that might help us to really see a fingerprint of those assets? And that's what our role has to be. We have to be the kind of the experienced maintenance engineer / IoT engineer / reliability person with the ability to make sense of this, all with the business case in mind, right? So we have to make sure that all of this stuff is going to deliver return of investment. It's going to give you back what you invest and far more. And we see that in our biggest customers where they've really doubled down on it, and now they have tens and tens of thousands of assets onboarded with Senseye.
And if we go back, like I said, to those initial scoping workshops where conversations around which assets to select and that kind of thing, I'm just interested to know, is there often early agreement on the types of assets to monitor? When you both come into the room, both with your own differing opinions and different viewpoints on things, but and I mean between, say, yourself and the customer, is there general agreement, or is there often a bit of a debate about, oh no, we think this asset requires monitoring versus this?
I love that question, because that really focuses on, if we make chocolate, right, you've got all these different assets that help you make chocolate, but then what are the problems? Like, often when you speak to customers, when I speak to different people, you see very quickly that they know the main problem, they know the impact it has, they just wish they knew the solution, and they've been maybe trying to find a solution for a long time, whether it's mechanical or perhaps over maintenance, getting a third-party company to come in and do various inspections or whatever. And when it breaks down, you can sometimes sense in the room, people think, oh God, when that breaks down, we're really in trouble. And I think this is what we have to try and do, first of all, is understand what pain points have customers got. And that comes down to the kind of questions that we ask, the way that you can break down what's the thing here that if we monitored it would have the biggest transformational impact. And that's what Senseye is for. That's why Senseye is a part of the Siemens portfolio, because you couple that together with a good edge system, some good sensors, some good methods of collecting data from a SCADA network, and pulling that through to a cloud platform, maybe with the additional other connections. So you might have wireless sensors also feeding into that. You might have an integration to CMMS, so an SAP solution or IBM Maximo, something like that integrates. And this is really where customers start to break that down, and they know what knock-on effects that has. So how does that impact production, or what kind of secondary damage would be caused? What kind of scrappage would happen if this line stopped mid-process? Would you have to throw that away? That's typically a problem from pharmaceutical. And my advice would be to speak to us, involve us to chat about the machine, how it breaks down, how often, when have you tried to fix it, what have you tried to do? And I think with our knowledge and our experience, together with yours, this is to any customer, we can deploy the software to learn the moments of prime machine health and learn where it deviates. And that's the canary in the mine. That's the early warning system that you wish you had. So that removes, again, that element of surprise.
And that's really interesting what you're saying there, Tom, about how much detail you go into the asset. Some of those examples, what's happened with it, what maintenance has been done. So you really go into that sort of level of detail about when selecting assets.
Yes, yeah, we have to, because sometimes you might find the most expensive machine that you think is the thing you need to monitor is actually not really a problem at all. There's a conveyor sitting in the middle of production that's only €2,000, and that's the real problem child of everything. And it keeps breaking down, and you don't have the full oversight of what that's causing you. In some cases as well, you might find the management say to the team, everything good? You're keeping everything running? The answer could be yes. As far as we see, there's no breakdowns that really cause any significant problems. But then you start to look through the system, you look back through the history of an asset, you say, this motor has been changed every 7 weeks. Why? Why are we changing this motor every 7 weeks? It should be lasting us at least 6 months. It's a pretty big piece of kit. And if you don't have that oversight, you might not understand, or maybe every time it breaks, the job is just to fix it, just to keep the line running. If that's your job, you do that. And that's a really honorable job. The goal is to keep manufacturing chocolate or tablets or whatever it is. But then you really have to break down, are we doing stupid things that aren't needed? Is there something inherently misaligned, or is there something that's really overstressing the system? And maybe something's been designed wrong, right? You might look at a part of the process, and a chain that's supposed to lift something keeps stretching. And then you finally go through all the calculations, and someone designed it wrong, and that chain is only half the thickness it should be, and it keeps degrading. We could monitor that all day long, but if it's designed wrong, like inherently there's a mechanical flaw there, we need to also factor that in as well. So any of the pre-sales team would start to look at that. We can start to assess that with previous things we've seen. And go into that detail. I think that's really crucial. That's what we do.
Yeah, it's just interesting for me to know as well. How, but you've explained very well how crucial that is. Yeah, really interesting.
You're more than welcome to come on a scope workshop now, whenever you want.
I know. I need to. I think there was one not too far away from me recently. I was going to attend, but unfortunately, other things came up. But definitely in the future, definitely. But I guess as we sort of come towards the end, I wanted to sort of finish on. Usually, we look at a summary of what we're talking about or key takeaways, but wanted to sort of end it in a slightly different way and just sort of reflect on the conversation, because we're talking about what customers are talking about, the customers you're talking to, what do they really want from predictive maintenance. And I think this is quite an interesting way to finish. Sorry, I'm building it up quite a lot, but I'm just wondering, in terms of, we know how much the market's changed over the past 2, 3, 4, 5 years. I've been at Senseye, Siemens now for 4 years now, and things have changed massively. But in terms of the conversations you're having even a year ago, Tom, with customers, how much have they changed from a year ago to now, or even further back to now? On just your reflections on that.
I think Industry 4 Industry 4.0 is starting to come to fruition. I think the risk-averse customer is starting to really see, perhaps over the fence at other companies, what difference it's made, where they've made a digital transformation and what's possible. You could do that wrong, but equally you could do it right, and you could start to see real impact where different pieces of software work together in a good workflow. You have good procurement processes, you have good maintenance management processes, and all the rest of it. And when you start to do that with a piece of predictive maintenance in the middle, especially where systems are already digitalized, perhaps more than they were a year ago or 2 years ago, to your point, Noel, it gets easier now to show, well, this is Senseye and this is how it could impact the maintenance. In the same way that you've got this other piece of software doing something else, this is going to be the watchdog that watches over, like a doctor watching over all of your assets to make sure they're all healthy, to really know at the exact moment when they're becoming unhealthy, and to alert you ahead of time what you need to do, and also where perhaps you're doing too much maintenance. So I think how it's changed is it's getting easier. The idea of digital transformation is far more talked about. And I think it's also making customers more confident to make that step into, okay, I don't know how this is going to work for my production, but you've shown me all these cases. We've spoken to customers who've had previous successes. And actually, just one final point to your question is we've got far more success cases now than we had 2, 3, 4 years ago, because of how many different types of assets we monitor, how many different types of industry we're now working in, which is still, it's been many for a long time, but now we start to really get deeply involved in different types of assets. I'm interested to see where we go next, actually.
And that's maybe a cliffhanger to leave this this episode on. We've looked a lot about the current state of it, and that's really interesting what you're saying about Industry 4.0, because it's one of those terms that's thrown around a lot, we know, in this in this industry, and it's always seems to be on the horizon. But that's the takeaway for me from that you're seeing it now, actually here and now. And in customers' hands, and they're seeing success on the back of it, which is obviously what we want to see.
And it's the same as what we see at exhibitions as well, isn't it? No, we see the latest, greatest technology, and you think, that's months, if not years away from reality. And one of my favorite things about Senseye, I think we had the co-pilot at Hanover Messe 2024, and within just a few months after that, it was in customers' hands, deployed as a piece of the software. So we've had that in place now for well over a year, being used, being tried and tested, being improved. So I love the methods that we've got as a team at Senseye to come up with something new and get it deployed quickly. Don't wait to the perfect moment. Just get it out there, get it monitoring some assets. It can already do the job, but it's now a case of how can we really make that a powerful sidekick, let's call it, to maintenance engineers.
And what a lovely way to finish. Thank you, Tom. As usual, our conversations, it just sort of flies by. I can't believe
it's always a pleasure.
But no, and like I said, both, it's a pleasure to speak to you, but both for the fact, you're speaking to customers every day and to bring that onto the podcast, but it's also, like I said, your previous experience, like pre-Siemens, pre-Senseye, actually, on the shop floor, doing all this stuff you talk about. So you're the perfect person to talk about both sides of the coin, as it were. And that's why it's great to have you on. But
thank you.
But yes, fantastic. But yeah, thank you for your contributions, Tom. We'll certainly invite you back, especially about that future piece. And I was even thinking we could talk about this a bit more regularly, because obviously, you're continuously having conversation with customers. It's not, it's an infinite number of conversations. So we should continue to dive it back in and see what's changing and how things are evolving to help other companies that are going through or considering predicting maintenance or other digital transformation as well. So.
Well, I'm glad we do this for that reason, to be honest, Noel, because it gives someone like me the chance to be enthusiastic about something that really is transformative. I think when you look at different technologies that have come and changed the world, I think predictive maintenance it has the ability to have a huge impact. We're seeing it with customers we've got already, and I just love talking about it. I think it's really amazing what you can do with a piece of software that monitors effectively mechanical machinery, and we can anticipate when it's going to break down. That was a dream to many engineers just a couple of decades ago.
Well, I'm pleased you like talking about it, because then that you fit very well into the podcast world. No, that's great. No, and thank you, Tom, again for your contributions. And yes, and thank you everyone for listening, wherever you are in the world. And we'll see you on the next episode. Thank you very much.
Cheers, Noel.
Please like and subscribe on all major podcast channels, and find out more about Senseye Predictive Maintenance at Siemens.com.